We're back on Inside USA, coming to you this week from Mexico City, where we've been looking at this country's drug war. An unprecedented wave of killings, a flood of illegal guns pouring over the border from the United States, and major American military aid to the Mexican government. Here's part two of our conversation with Jorge Chabat and Laura Carlson. Let's talk about human rights violations. One day after President Bush signed the Plan Mexico Muerte initiative into law, this torture scandal erupted with U.S. contractors on video teaching Mexican police torture techniques. Jorge, what was the effect of that in Mexico?
The problem of human rights should be addressed in a different way. You have more professional police forces. You have more surveillance on the security forces. I mean, that's what you have to do. The problem, I mean, is we have...
Listen, more surveillance in the United States has not actually helped with the problem of defense contractors run wild.
Well, that's maybe because the judicial system of the U.S. is not working the way it should work. I mean,
so Mexico should be demanding human rights improvements in the United States as part of this plan? That's a logical conclusion of your argument.
Mexico can do that. I'm not sure that the United States is going to pay attention, much attention to that.
So the question is, does this plan increase the prospect for human rights in Mexico?
I think that this plan just helped the Mexican government to fight drug trafficking. If the fight of drug trafficking involves human rights violation, well, human rights violation will be there. You have to address that problem with other instruments.
That was a frank admission, Laura, that the fight against the drug traffickers is going to involve human rights violations, and we've seen them.
It's already involving it. There were 8 recommendations from the National Human Rights Commission just yesterday against the Army. And it's not only beatings or arbitrary detentions, it's torture in a systematic way. That was what was so shocking about the torture tapes, beyond the images themselves, which were repulsive. That basically they were showing that this practice is institutionalized. When the images came out, the local authorities said, well, we think this is just fine, and we're not going to even suspend the program.
Laura, this is sort of terrorism on one side, drug trafficking on the other. Every country has to fight its specific problems.
Well, I think it depends on what the governments want to talk about, because if you look at the bill itself, it's just much broader than most people realize, and that's one of the most dangerous things about it. Because by cutting this broad swath, it includes not only counterterrorism and counter-narcotics, but includes border security. So in many of the clauses, what you have is actually the criminalization of migrants, where they're lumped into the same category with terrorists and
drug traffickers.
And with drug traffickers, yes.
So, Jorge, this is about immigration. No one's saying a word about immigration, but that's the underlying threat.
Well, it's about the respect for law. And we have in Mexico laws that establishing that you cannot enter into Mexico without documents. That's the fact.
Laura,
countries have to deal with
why do you think that immigration is not being talked about as part of this plan?
Because so many people would object. And both in the United States and in Mexico as well, because it's one thing to have immigration reform that will enable you to have rule of law in terms of how you control your borders. But when you put it in this kind of a package, you are criminalizing them, and much of that surveillance equipment is to be used against them as well. And this again is the imposition of the U.S. agenda on Mexico.
Okay.
Migrants who don't have documents should be stopped. It shouldn't be tortured. It shouldn't be mistreated. But you have to enforce some kind of controls. That's the world we live. I don't agree with that. That's what is happening everywhere in the world. Yeah, but what else can you do if you have some laws that establishes that? I mean, that's my point.
As we draw to a close here, let's widen the picture and look at the regional picture. The United States doesn't have a lot of reliable allies in Latin America these days. Colombia has been a huge recipient of U.S. military aid. Is this what's happening with this Muerte initiative, that the United States is trying to cultivate Mexico as a much-needed ally?
In this case, I think the argument is that the United States needs a reliable border. That's the basic fact. It doesn't matter if the government is from the right or left or whatever, because we have had in the past some governments in Mexico with some left-wing rhetoric. Obviously, we can discuss if they were left-wing. But in this case, I think the basic concern is stability.
I think the geopolitical significance of this is absolutely clear. The United States does need Mexico as an ally in any case, but in this case what's happening is this relationship transfers the reins of the relationship with Mexico, a very important relationship, from the State Department to the Pentagon. And I don't think that that's something the Democrats would want.
As we look towards the elections, that is a very definitive last word. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Drug dealers and gangsters and some police officers pray to her for protection. from rival gangs or from bullets. She is Santa Muerte, the saint of the dead, and she's venerated by many in Mexico who live on the edge of the law. One of the main shrines to Santa Muerte is here in Mexico City, in the hardscrabble barrio of Tepito. We went there to speak to one worshiper.
Y a ti bendita Santa Muerte.
Y a ti bendita Santa Muerte.
En el nombre bendito de Jesús.
En el nombre bendito de Jesús.
Traigo a mi vida.
Traigo a mi vida.
La solución.
La solución.
A mi necesidad.
A mi
Y a
necesidad.
ti bendita Santa Muerte.
Y a ti bendita Santa Muerte.
Monsignor David Romo Guillén, Archbishop of the Traditional Catholic Church, at your service.
En este caso, el
I'm the main leader of the Church of Saint Death, of the devotees of Saint Death in Mexico.
muerte en México. Y la Santa Muerte es una
Saint Death is a faith that has been present in Mexico for more than 400 years. Basically, it's a faith that's growing. It's a strong faith. For us, the devotion and adoration of Saint Death is directed at an angel, not at a skeleton as such, as we look at it.
Nos han querido el decir es que
People like to say that our believers are drug dealers, or that they hurt people, that they're linked to the mafia. That's just legends. This shoots to pieces the myth that the Catholic Church and the media have built up. Many of them have linked us to serial killers and people like that. Today, all types of people are devoted to the saint. There is no specific sector. All types, such as, for instance, poor people or rich people. Here, she broke through all barriers.
rompió todas las barreras. Aquí lo que trabajamos es todo
Here we only work with the force of God, and the responses are strong. We have testimonies of people who have been cured of cancer, who got out of jail, who beat illnesses, people who have made it through difficult times with their families because they have been blessed by God.
porque han recibido una bendición de Dios.
With regards to politics and the current situation in the US, for us what's worrying is the aspect of migration.
El señor Barack Obama o el señor
We hope that Mr. Barack Obama or Mr. McCain will give the alternative of opening a space for the Mexican migrants, because they're a big labor force, first of all. Secondly, that our religion expressions are met with respect, because unfortunately a lot of the time the Catholic Church and the bishops over there are intolerant and disrespectful and aggressive against our faithful.
son intolerantes y respetuosos.
That's all the time we have for this week's edition of Inside USA. From the Sonora Market in Mexico City, until next time, so long.